Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cackle, where we meet with Midwest changemakers and connect the dots between economic trends and the lived experiences of people navigating them. I'm Emily Heinz. I'm the founder and managing director of Entry Point. At Entry Point, we partner with economic development organizations and nonprofits to foster inclusive and vibrant communities across the Midwest through research and community-focused programming. And if you want to see any of our latest research, we'll be talking a tiny bit about our 2021 Detroit Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Report today, which you can find all of our research on entrypointmi.com. And if this is your first time with us, welcome. And if you're a repeat cackler, we're glad to have you back. And today's episode is really fun. We're going to be talking to Carrie Leahy, who is an attorney at Bodman, and she recently took over as chair of the firm. And she is a very long-time tech community person, is like the best, like the go-to person in the community when you're looking for legal advice. So, hey!
Hi, Emily. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to see you because I haven't seen you since prior to the pandemic.
Yep. And then adding in the pandemic, it's been a little while.
So. Yeah, exactly. I'm like,
actually, as we get back, I'm sure we'll see each other soon in person as there's more and more events. So it's great.
I know. Yeah. And I feel like I always see you like on social media, like people, I know like Michigan Venture Capital Association just did like a profile of Bodman because you guys are like really involved with them and stuff. So I'm like, I see you kind of like in the
around the edges. Yeah.
Yeah. So give a little background. Since I'm not a lawyer, I'll do like a really horrific job describing everything you guys do. Give a little bit of background kind of like on Bodman, your role at the firm, and kind of like the role the firm plays in the entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Okay, that's a lot. I'll tackle it bit by bit. So Bodman's a full-service law firm. We've been around for over 90 years. I happen to be in the Ann Arbor office, and so have a bit more of a focus in the emerging companies area, which is how I got to know you. But the firm as a whole is full service. We can handle kind of any business need, and we've got lawyers that do corporate work, IP, real estate, litigation, banking, workplace law, you name it, we can handle it for any business. So that's great. We're about 150 lawyers or so in Michigan, based in 5 offices throughout the state. So all over the place. We're active in all the communities that we're in, and it's a good way to get to know people in the community because we're on boards and organizations and get to do stuff like this with Entry Point. So that's just a bit about the firm.
I think you guys have also been my lawyer at like every place I've worked. You guys are like Entry Point's lawyer. I don't know if you even knew that.
I did.
And then I was at Michigan Venture Capital Association. I was at Spark. Like I was like a bunch of people I've worked with. Like you guys are like so I do feel like you have like a lot of flexibility in like the type of businesses you guys work with because you have like such a good staff of lawyers that it's like me as like a small business that's not a tech business like you guys are so helpful with, but like a lot of tech businesses are like, oh yeah, like of course there are lawyer too. So
well, in this space we do a lot on the financing side for younger businesses. Yeah. As well as later fundraising rounds. We also work with investors in businesses. So we can handle kind of both sides, but then also the needs that a younger business and then a more established, once they get their feet up, on the ground, up and running, things that they need from a corporate standpoint. I would say the Ann Arbor office does a lot of the work in this area, but we've got lawyers in other offices as well. That do work in the startup VC, institutional investor kind of realm. So we're
where are all your offices, or generally where are they all?
So our largest office is in Detroit at Ford Field. That ties to our long-standing relationship with the Lions and the Ford family there at Ford Field. And then we are in Troy, in Ann Arbor, in Grand Rapids, and we've got a small office up in Sheboygan as well. So Grand Rapids is our newest office. So we opened that actually several years ago, but we built new space that opened last summer. So it's been, quiet there at first, but we now have a lot more people in the office back up and running. So we've got room for 23 lawyers out there. And
Awesome.
I think we're closing in around 12 lawyers. And then we've got a number of staff out there as well. So it's a great spot.
Yeah. West Michigan's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I was like, one day when I'm old, I'll move, like buy a cottage out there.
So you're going to go to West Michigan and everybody else is going to Florida.
Everyone should be going to West Michigan. They've got like quality of life over there.
They have the beaches. Yeah. It's just maybe not in the winter. So
yeah. Okay. So kind of give your thoughts. I mean, like you guys are so ingrained in kind of like all aspects of like the capital continuum for the tech community. Like give kind of like your perspective on the tech community and kind of like the Midwest tech community overall, but like, what do you think like the strengths and weaknesses of the community are, like areas for improvement?
So when I first moved to Ann Arbor in 2004 as a professional, I'd been here before, but as a professional started in 2004, and I'd come out of Chicago. And in Chicago, there were a tremendous number, still early stage, but tremendous number of fundraising activities. But there appeared to be more capital to match that in Chicago. So you could be an entrepreneur who was in a fundraising mode and you might find access to capital right where you were. Not the same as if you were in California or, in Boston, but it was better than when I moved here. And you had a tremendous number of entrepreneurs, especially with U of M and the Office of Tech Transfer, but there was not as much access to capital. So that was like one of the things I just noticed when I first moved here. Yeah. But, people were sophisticated. They understood what was going on. They understood terms of deals and what things looked like. It was just more, the issue we saw was lack of capital, really on the early stage. We were seeing clients have access to capital later stage, but on the early stage, it was definitely an issue, struggle for a lot of people.
What do you attribute that to? Like, do you think it's because there's not enough like angel groups and venture firms, or like, not enough like large enough firms, or are people?
Back then, I think it wasn't enough. And now, and I think maybe one of the themes that we'll talk about here is maybe lack of access to capital, but it's getting better. So I think back then you didn't see the level of organization back in the early 2000s. You just didn't, when I moved here, you didn't see the level of organization that you do on some of the early investors. And now you are seeing much more of that. So I think things are getting better. I just think there's still room for improvement. But definitely. People have gotten more sophisticated and are doing a good job with identifying things. And I think the founders are more sophisticated now too. So I think as overall, one of the kind of like strengths of the area is that level of sophistication has grown, especially probably with the number of exits that we've had. And now we're seeing more people put capital back in. So I think there was a tremendous push years ago to start more of the investing activity, to get more exits, to have those people stay, and it's paying off. It's see that paying off now.
Yeah, and I think too, when we have like kind of these higher profile exits and like things are happening in the community, it's getting a lot more notice from like even outside of the Midwest, like in the coasts, where people are kind of looking for additional investment opportunities, and their communities are a little bit more saturated, and then they'll like come to, and maybe that makes access to capital for tech companies in the Midwest a little bit easier, or in Michigan a little bit easier, just because of the profile increase.
Well, and I feel like COVID also, I mean, it was for sure a curse for many ways, but there are also some like blessings and silver linings to it. And we've seen a lot of clients get capital out of other areas and here in the Midwest during COVID still, and they're able to do it efficiently. They're having more meetings online. They are doing diligence on online, not necessarily where investors are coming in person, and they're getting capital more quickly. And so that's been really interesting. We also are seeing people, I don't know that it's as much now, but there definitely was a number of people. You saw people coming in from New York and Chicago and otherwise who were in cities that maybe they were moving home to be with parents or be with other family members here in the Michigan area. And you're hearing people start talking about, maybe I'm going to stay here. This is a great place to be. We've got sophisticated companies that you can work with, sophisticated service providers that you can work with, and it's affordable or more affordable than some other areas. So
that's like that's definitely like one thing we talk about a lot in the Detroit report that we just released, which people can find at entrypointmi.com. And Bodman supported the report. You guys were sponsors of the report, so that was so good. So thank you for that. But yeah, that's definitely one thing that we talk about in there too, is just like the cost of doing business and the cost of living in like areas like Detroit or in the Midwest compared to like Boston, New York, San Francisco, where it's like extremely expensive to live and work and like, to enjoy your life and all of those things. Yes. So it's like the capital efficiency, I think, is a little bit better in the Midwest than other places. So that's good that like people, maybe leveling the playing field a little bit with all of the remote work. Well,
your dollar goes longer, right? Goes further. So if you're investing, you're able to utilize the capital a little more efficiently, I think, than if you're in one of the big cities and you're paying higher salaries, higher office costs, things like that.
Yeah, I've been really interested to see all these talent initiatives that are coming out around trying to attract people that have kind of been in these higher cost of living areas and then are like, hey, you could work remotely like in Michigan, or you could like have your company over here and you'd have a bigger yard. Because I talk to so many people, like even people on the Cackle, where I'm like, oh my gosh, are you like calling in from California? Like, are you? And they're like, no, I'm calling after. I talked to Riley Brennan from Trucks. He's in San Francisco and he teaches at Sanford. And he was he was on the Cackle like last year about this time. And it was so funny because I was thinking he was calling in from California, but he had actually taken his dog, 3 children, and he and his wife drove across the country, and his sister had like a cabin in Pennsylvania, and they just drove across the country. I was like, what a nightmare. Like,
yes, it doesn't sound very fun, but
instead of being in their like, small San Francisco apartment, they were like, we have to.
I think people had to do things like that. I think you saw a lot of that in New York City too. People left the city and went to places like Berkshire's and other spaces outside of New York where you could just get outside. So
yeah, it is so interesting.
Definitely in need.
Yeah, it is kind of was strange times. How do you feel like you're seeing? So it's like you talked about coming here in 2004. Like, how do you think that the entrepreneurial ecosystem has been evolving?
I think there's been a tremendous amount of adaptation. We started back. We've always been innovators, right? In Michigan, we started with Henry Ford and the auto industry, and there's innovation out of that. I think tremendous push to kind of adapt from not just auto, because obviously it's been very successful, but to do other things. And now we're seeing more mobility technology. And that's a tremendous add for our area. We're seeing more, different technology companies, and with the exits, we're keeping people too. So there's just been a lot more innovation, I think, that we've seen, and a concerted push to keep that here. We've got great access to, sophisticated service providers. We've got, serial entrepreneurs now that have had successful exits, and they spend a lot of time and are very willing to work with companies. We've got good organizations, like you had mentioned, Spark. They can help. They're a good resource for people. The MVCA is tremendously active in trying to generate more awareness on capital issues and investment issues. And there's just been a lot of community kind of gathering around it to make sure that Michigan succeeds, I think, and people take pride in it. You see a lot of entrepreneurs that want to make sure they are trying to keep their business here. I think one of the changes we saw was back in the kind of early days of investing, our clients would have a successful round and the investors might tell them, you have to move. We want you in Denver. We want you in Austin or, California, wherever. And we are seeing that less now. And I think that's a win for all of us. We've got businesses now where they're employing larger numbers of people here, and that's good. So I think it's not just that it happened by luck. I think a lot of different community leaders worked towards it. And I think the service providers, the financing sources are all growing with that technology growth and the entrepreneurial growth in the area. So I think it's all.
Yeah. And I think you do see, I just love to see kind of like that ripple effect, buzzword, from the exits that happen, whether it be Cover My Meds in Ohio or Duo Security in Michigan.
Right.
We see these companies that are, strategically located in the Midwest, and that the founders are really, dedicated to the region, but it's also not just because they like it. They think that there's a strategic advantage for them to be located here.
Right.
And then you see, even after they scale their companies, Duo Security exited for over $3 billion, or was acquired by Cisco for over $3 billion. And then, you see people from the Duo team that are, some of them who had left the company started Census or started Blue Mira. I think I'm saying that right.
And doing consulting for other companies.
Yeah. And so you're seeing these cybersecurity people kind of propping up all over the place. And I'm just kind of
we have tremendous access to talent here that we've always had great talent with the universities we have in the area, not just University of Michigan. It's obviously a huge source of great talent and engineers, finance, all of that. But you've also got Michigan State, Wayne State, all of the universities are really pushing off tremendous talent. And I think students are starting to see a reason they could stay in Michigan, whereas before maybe they didn't see quite as much of that. And people, we're seeing more, students out of U of M Law School stay in Michigan, whereas before maybe more of them would leave and go to New York and California, Chicago. But we're seeing people want to stay in the area as a place that they could do good work with good companies and good people, and have a sophisticated kind of business practice, but still be here where they can afford to buy a house.
Yeah. I was talking to Kate Hernandez on the Cackle last week, and she's with the Detroit Venture Partners. And we were talking about that same thing. She had interned in Detroit, in the early 2000s. I graduated in the early 2000s, and, when you were thinking about where do you want to intern or where do you want to work? A lot of people were oh, I'm requesting Chicago office. I was in public accounting at the time.
Yep.
It was a new worst day every day, but, but at the time I was where do you work? And people were oh, I'm going to Chicago. I'm going to LA or something like that. And now you are seeing so many people want to work in Detroit or work in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, we're seeing more people want to be in our Detroit office than we ever had before. It was often times where if we would be meeting with people that have been practicing for usually 2 to 5 years, coming back to Michigan to be near family, coming from Chicago and New York, Boston, Minneapolis, oftentimes they wanted to be in the Ann Arbor office. And now we're seeing a big push towards Detroit, and that, that's fantastic. And there's multiple destinations. Also seeing a lot of people say, hey, I want to be in Grand Rapids. And there's more talk about Michigan, and with the press that we're getting on some of the great exits too, I think people are just seeing it as a real viable option.
Yeah, definitely. And people are like a little bit cooler in Detroit too, like between Ann Arbor and Detroit. Like anytime people are like, "Oh, where do you live?" I'm like, "Oh, Ann Arbor," and like people are like very like everyone in Detroit's like a little bit cooler.
I don't know. I'm an Ann Arborite, so I can't agree with you there.
Okay, so in Entry Point's 2021 Detroit Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Report, we talk a lot about kind of the four elements needed to that we think you need to like grow and work in unison in order to have a strong high tech community. So like talent, research, capital, and community, and we kind of like measure those in the report. And where do you think the focus kind of needs to be in the next couple years to kind of keep the momentum going in the region?
Early stage access to capital. That's what we see the most, where we've got founders with great ideas, with a good business plan, ability to take companies forward, and it's hard to get that early capital. It's better, like by all means, it's better than it used to be, but I just think that's where we just need to keep the pressure on. I'm seeing growth on the talent side and some of the other elements that you're talking about, but if I had to say like my one place to put like where we need the biggest bang for our buck, it's in the access to capital.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely, Entry Point does an annual research report for the Michigan Venture Capital Association every year on kind of like capital activity in the state. And that's something that we find every year is that like the amount of capital, like even follow-on funding, when you're looking at companies that have already raised a round of venture capital and like, which is like you're saying, it's like very early stages where we've got the trouble. So if you even look at just those companies that have already raised venture capital and see like, ask like even the investors, like how much more capital do you think this company needs in order to be successful and continue like reaching milestones and scaling and all of that? It's like far outweighs the amount of capital that we have.
Agree, totally agree. And we're like our clients, we're working on, one of my colleagues just said that he had done like 10 financing rounds in a very short period of time. So we are seeing a lot of it, but we need to see more of it.
Yeah.
And more here would be good, I think, for the community as a whole. Not just the community in Ann Arbor, but in Michigan and the regional area. I just think in the Midwest, maybe we'll say, it would be good to have more.
And I think it's like, one thing I worry about is like probably like 10 years ago when I started doing that research, it was kind of like you would see the amount of capital coming from out of state be like maybe $2.50 for every $1 that was like from Michigan. You'd get like $2.50 from outside of the state, which I think is kind of a healthy balance. You want to attract that capital from outside the state. And I think we've seen over the 10 years that kind of escalate where now you're getting like over $11 from out of the state for everyone.
And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. And it's like, when you get like disproportionate like that, that's when you start to see that companies are going to need that are spending so much time outside of the Midwest fundraising. That's like, like you do think like, oh, there needs to be more capital located here for these companies.
Well, we have a lot of investors focused on that. I guess I would just highlight it's at the early stage, especially. So, and I think as we talked about, some of the exits are already starting to impact that, and more will happen. And with time, I'm sure more exits are going to happen. And so it will build on itself, I think. But right now, what I'm seeing is more money coming in from outside the area than we are from inside the state.
Yeah, we definitely saw too that the most active investors during the pandemic were the ones that were at the earliest stages, because it was like just so critically necessary during the pandemic for like these extremely early stage companies to get some access to capital through the pandemic. So it was kind of crazy. Like Invest Detroit, I don't know how they possibly pulled all that off, but they did
a great job.
Dang yeoman's work over there. Like they did like 75 investments during the pandemic or something, like probably more than that. I mean, and that would be like just during 2020. So I'm just like, I I think
Right, well, and by no
the
means,
time machine.
I mean, I think that was all great. And by no means is this like a knock on any of that, because I
Oh,
think
yeah.
you need that, and they've done a great job. I would love to see even more of it from others as well.
No, I think it like underscores your point. Like the fact they had to like pull off, like, I think she has a time machine and like a miracle, like it's like a miracle worker in order
Magic
to
stuff going on.
achieve that amount. So it's like the companies and the deal flow is there, and it's just like, how can you even possibly keep up with it at this point? Like, you need more of that early stage capital. So I totally agree. Yeah, sorry, I've got a bit of a cold. If you can't tell, I sound like the Crypt Keeper. Do you remember that show?
No.
It was like, that must have been a show from when I was little. It was like the scariest thing ever. There was like this, like, why am I explaining the Crypt Keeper live on the internet? It sounds like this, and he would read scary stories, and it was.
I don't remember that, but I'm older than you are, so I don't know.
So what are some of the common obstacles that you see startups face as they kind of raise angel and venture rounds and then scale? Like, I mean, there's probably a million.
It goes back to the biggest obstacle is getting funding. So,
Man, do you think like, as far as like legal issues go, like, do you think that some of these like really early stage companies who haven't raised a round of capital, like, kind of run into certain legal issues as they're doing it? Or is it kind of like, if you have like a good lawyer, they can just guide you through those? And
yeah, I mean, I think that with the growth of all of the investments and the entrepreneur, landscape here, the service providers have all stepped up, and you can get sophisticated legal counsel here in Michigan just as much as you can get sophisticated legal counsel in Chicago, LA, or New York. I guess the benefit here is that we don't charge, $1,000 an hour like they do in California, and then add it up and add it up. So you can do it, and they are great, but we can do the same work.
We don't have very much viewership outside of the Midwest. So we gotta be nice to them.
There's a lot of great lawyers here in Michigan that can do the work for a lot more efficiencies. So you're not going to spend your precious investment dollars on your legal spend, which that's not where you want to spend it. But from the legal side, I mean, I think as long as the founders and the entrepreneurial team are working with a good lawyer, accountant, outside providers, I don't see the obstacles being on the legal front or the accounting front, because they're getting set up the right way, and they are working through their business plan, and they've got access to talent. There's good access to, there's marketing people, there's, the finance teams that they need. And most of the founders that we're working with don't need, like 25 people right away, right? They need a share of this person and that person, and they work with consultants. And we have tons of great people in Michigan to do it. But to get to that next level and be able to scale up, they need the capital to do it. And some of them are able to utilize funds from an exit that they've done, or work with someone that they know that has had an exit. But by and large, the entrepreneurs need access to capital. The ones, that are working with the universities to do technology transfer, spinoffs, that, they still need capital and go through those issues, but it's not as big of an obstacle for them as it is for the folks that are coming in without that backing. So, we've got clients that go through grant processes, and that can be really helpful too. Navigating some of the grant ways can be difficult, but we have tons of people in the area and at different organizations that know their way around it. So as long as through word of mouth, I feel like a lot of the entrepreneurs in the area, if they start talking to like so-and-so and so-and-so, they get hooked up with the right people. We've got all those people here now. Yeah. It just goes back to every time, they can get the people, they can get the advice from good third-party providers. It just goes back to the capital.
Yeah, it'll be good, especially now that kind of like the pandemic is starting to subside and like people are starting to.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, I know. I just say starting to subside because otherwise I'll jinx us all.
I know.
In February 2020, I said something like, "Oh, what could possibly happen? I've had a cold for the last like 6 months. Like, how could it get any worse?" And I said that in a public forum, and literally like 4 weeks later, I had people posting in the public forum being like, "Thanks a lot."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh, why?"
It's your fault.
Yeah, so sorry everybody. Yeah, so it's like I think yeah, I agree with all the things that you're saying anyway. um and then what do you feel like is kind of like on the horizon, like what is your focus like professionally, personally, like going forward?
Let's see. Professionally, we are tremendously busy right now, which is great. And so training up our younger lawyers to be able to continue to do this work is a huge thing that we've got to focus on, because we want to make sure that we can keep up the level of talent that we have. We've got a lot of law firms here in the area that can do this work. And so we want to keep that talent here in Michigan so we can continue that. So kind of from like the law firm practice side, that's one. In my chair role, I would say just working through the continued effect of the pandemic. You know, our firm has done very well. We're doing great. So continuing that, and with a focus on keeping up our culture. That's hard to do when people are remote. So I'm in the office most days, and I think that we're trying to get more in-office events, get-togethers where people are safe and they feel comfortable, but starting to reconnect, I think, is a huge thing, you know, for an organization to keep their culture. Takes a lot of work. So that's a big thing on my mind from the professional standpoint. So
how do you kind of think you're approaching that?
We've been flexible with people, and we right now are open. Our office has been open the whole time, but we were open really only for essential workers, just like everyone in the state of Michigan. So we followed all the guidelines, but then when we were able to open, we opened up. We've got a lot of our people in, but not everyone. So it's really voluntary right now. And we're working through what it's going to look like in September. So talking to experts and consultants on what makes sense and what are law firms doing and what makes sense from a real estate perspective and for our clients and for our firm. And so it's a slow but thoughtful process that I'm sure lots of people are going through right now.
Yeah, definitely. It is like phase 3. It's like there was the pre-pandemic, how people used to operate, then like how people were operating, and then all of a sudden we're now in this new frontier of like, it's not like it was prior to the pandemic. Like it's still some in-between stage where like people are just not sure what to expect and not super confident in the future still. And so.
Well, and I think we have to be thoughtful about what schools are doing. And right now they're saying they're going to be open, but does that change? So I think what we've all learned is you have to be very adaptable, nimble, and patient. So.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much. Well, one, thank you for sponsoring the 2021 Detroit Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Report.
Happy to do it.
You did, super exciting. And then thank you for joining us on the Cackle.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you, Emily.
Yeah. See you.
Right,
See you next week.